We got OT thrillers left and right, NHL news popping off, and that's why you're tapped right back into your daily source for hockey news, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Happy Hump Day. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The chase for the Stanley Cup pushes on, but the NHL newsreel continues to fire. Happy Wednesday, everybody. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, joined as always by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Rodin, on this side of the microphone. You know what it is. It's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out to the everydayers making us your first listen every single day. We see and appreciate you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get 150 bones in bonus bets with any winning $5 wager. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to giddy up and get started, which is exactly what we're going to do right now, Mr. Rodin, because there is so much happening in the NHL, and we're not even just talking about on the ice, which obviously you and I are going to cover. You got to get to these Rangers Eastern Conference Final. Game 4, another OT thriller. We'll talk about that. Western Conference Final. You and I haven't talked about RoboCop, Explosion, Roope Hintz back in the lineup, distributing for his man. I don't know about you, Steele, but I'm fired up about this Dallas Stars team. We'll talk about Game 4, Western Conference Final tonight, same game parlays. But let's start with some news, my friend, because look, Dan Bylsma is in for the Seattle Kraken, and you and I had talked a lot about this Kraken team over the last couple of years. I also want to mention to you the Boston Bruins are going to be an active club. I'm hearing Chandler Stephenson, Linus Ullmark might be out the door. We'll talk about that very quickly, but Dan Bylsma is in, Steele. I don't know about what you think of this ad because the man hasn't been behind a bench since coaching the Buffalo Sabres back in 2017. He's 320 and 190 in his NHL career with the Pens and the Sabres. I don't know if you like this hire. 53-year-old, he's, Jack Adams Award winner, Stanley Cup winner. What's your take on this? Because the Seattle Kraken are only 2 seasons removed from taking the Dallas Stars to 7 games in the second round. Mute button, brother. She got you.
Mute button continues to get me. It's early in the morning, but we're getting
okay.
after it this Wednesday. But
He's
look,
back.
I was very surprised with the firing of Dave Haxtell. I know obviously it wasn't the season the Seattle Kraken, the players, the coaching, the organization, and the fans were really expecting. Like you said, after having an incredible second year in the NHL. Only being in their second season in the NHL, making it to the Stanley Cup playoffs, knocking off the Colorado Avalanche, taking the Dallas Stars to 7 games. I mean, They did a lot of great things in year 2, and year 3 just didn't pan out the way they hoped. I believe they were 34, 35, and 9 with 81 points on the regular season. They were way out of a playoff spot with the Vegas Golden Knights winning that second wild card spot. So I was a little surprised with the Dave Haxtell firing just because, again, it was only 3 seasons into this new NHL team. They already made the playoffs last year and it didn't pan out. Maybe it was a huge factor was the players weren't buying into the system of Haxtell, and that's what they went with the coaching change. And, with Dan Bylsma, I'm very eager to see what he's capable of bringing to this team. Obviously, an extended period of time not coaching at the NHL level. But you look at his track record, and I know most of his career was with the Pittsburgh Penguins through 2008 and through 2008 to 2014, and in that time won a Stanley Cup champion with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I know, even again, his record kind of speaks for itself: 320 wins, 190 losses, and 55 ties. Again, most of that being with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And how can you not win with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, and Marc-Andre Fleury? So, there's a lot of things going on here. So I'm eager. I'm happy for him to be back in the NHL because it has been a while. And again, with this coaching carousel going around the NHL, it just seems like it just seems to be the thing nowadays in the NHL, and not just maybe in the NHL, but the NBA as well, and sports leagues, that the coaches get looked at first. They get fired. They look for an immediate change. And that's just how it is in today's age. But excited for Bylsma to be back into the NHL and see what he can do behind the bench of the Seattle Kraken.
And looking at this Kraken lineup, like obviously they have some intriguing fantasy pieces. Matty Beniers a down year. Maybe he can bounce back. We love Jared McCann. There's some awesome bottom six love for peripheral value.
Yeah.
Yanni Gourds of the world. But the
Tolvanen as
team,
well.
yeah, and we like Vince Dunn on the back
Yeah.
end. But Joey Decord, even though he had flashes of brilliance, is not the guy. He's a backup. He's even maybe a third stringer. Philip Grubauer was up and down. They don't really have a goalie. They don't really have a superstar, a true number one guy. Bylsma has his work cut out for him because as much as I know that team deserves some credit for taking the Stars to 7 games, maybe it was a bit of an overachieve because looking at this lineup, Steele, no offense to the Jaden Schwartzes and Thomas Tatars of the world, and I know this lineup's going to look different by the time they hit the ice in October. I just don't see it. So Dan Bylsma is not being in the league for this long. I know he was an assistant with the Red Wings for a number of seasons. He's been around the game. He's got his work cut out for him. I don't know what he's going to be able to do to maybe boost some of this fantasy value. You and I will break all of that down heading up to the draft. However, the Boston Bruins are in a pretty precarious situation, Steele, after 2 big regular seasons and then 2 fairly disappointing. I know they made it past the first round this year, but 2 fairly disappointing postseasons. And this team has a lot of decisions to make, a lot of UFAs. Yeah. Obviously, one of those being Linus Ullmark. He has a modified no movement, no trade clause. He's got 16 teams on his no trade list. So obviously something's got to give there, but you can't help but feel that this team needs an injection of offense. It needs some more depth and maybe Steele. Like I like the back end, Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm. They got Brandon Carlo back there. I like some of those names. But up front, they're going to need to do something, and maybe that is Chandler Stephenson. That's the name that's out there heavy for them. That seems like the perfect prototypical Boston Bruin. Hit me with your take on the Bruins quick before we get to break. We'll get back to the playoff coverage, of course, and our same game parlays for tonight.
Look, they got over 20 million in cap space heading into the offseason. And obviously, they've got their guys signed up long-term. David Pastrnak for another 7 years. Yep. Brad Marchand's got 1 more year, and he'll most likely re-sign with the Boston Bruins, on a shorter-term deal. Charlie Coyle's got 2 more years. Pavel Zacha's got 3 years. They've got deals done with the guys they want at least for the next 2 to 3 seasons. Charlie McAvoy, of course, as well, and Hampus Lindholm and Brandon Carlo. These UFAs that they have in Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen, Patrick Maroon, James Van Riemsdyk, Derek Forberg, Kevin Shattenkirk. These are lower tier names with the highest one the highest one being, like you said,
DeBrusk.
Linus Ullmark after this past season. But the highest tier name right now is Jake DeBrusk. And there are a lot of teams I'm hearing that are very interested in going after Jake DeBrusk this offseason, with, I think, the Toronto Maple Leafs being one of them potentially. So I think that's a deal they're going to want to get done. And you could see the X factor in Jake DeBrusk clearly in that first round series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think, I believe that Boston Bruins are going to want to re-sign him almost, as quickly as possible. Knowing and defining what that contract and what his term will be is a little bit tricky, just because of how inconsistent his game can be at times throughout the regular season. And it really takes him a while to get into the stride of things, into the game when you watch him. And he does struggle a lot, no matter where he's plays. Top 6, bottom 6, doesn't matter where he's moved around. He can struggle and he can prosper. He can soar. So with me, Jake DeBrusk, it's really hard to put a number and a contract and term on what he would get. But I believe he's going to be sought after this offseason from multiple teams, Boston Bruins being number 1.
I think the Bruins are going to be a very active club. That's not a bold take. Those rumors are going around. To draw it back into the fantasy side of things, though, this team, you got to be very careful of what you're doing, because we don't know what that lineup is going to look like. That is going to mean changes, even for guys like David Pastrnak. Is he still an elite piece? Most definitely. However, if things start to really shake up in Boston, and I'm all for the Chandler Stephensons of the world, we've seen it with other teams. Look at the Detroit Red Wings, even last season, brought in a ton of guys. We liked all those moves. It didn't exactly pan out. Maybe too much fresh blood isn't a good thing. We got fresh takes coming up right around the break. Steele's ready to pop off on these New York Rangers, a blown opportunity there. I want to see what you have to say about that. Of course, out west, I'm fired up about these Dallas Stars, Steele. Wednesday's bets. I hit my same game parlay on Monday. Let's see if we can keep this bad boy rolling. You know where we're making those same game parlays. It's over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and of course, same game parlays. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review, and make sure you go follow us on our new Instagram account, Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod. Flip's been killing it with the graphics, the reels. Make sure you go follow us over there. We really do appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Also, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming from Fox Sports or ESPN. You got to make the switch. You got to turn down the volume, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with your boy Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden. Thank you so much for tuning in. Getting over to the Eastern Conference Finals. We're going to break down the Western Conference Finals, but let's start with Game 4 between the New York Rangers and Florida Panthers. I got a lot on my mind. I got to talk about this New York Rangers team. They had the chance. They blew it. But Flip, I want to hear your take first. What did you see from Game 4, and what were your takeaways really from both squads?
Yeah, number one, it's kind of a little bit more of the same. And this happens in the postseason, right? And for good and for bad. You saw it with Linus Pettersson in terms of a bad streak. Sometimes guys just go, and it goes both ways. Vincent Trocheck, for example. I'm going to start there. What a stud. And here goes Carter Verhaeghe again, another player that I love to talk about, Steele. And these guys are making both of us look real good right now. What I saw was, again, the New York Rangers getting killed on the power play. The Florida Panthers are now getting it done on the power play. That is going to catch up with this New York Rangers team. That's number one. 4 more chances on the man advantage, and they convert on 2 of them. So that was number one. Number 2, I think the Rangers just kind of fell off heavily. The shots went down in the second and third period. They were not generating nearly enough chances. And I understand Bobrovsky was there when he needed to be. But for me, 23 shots on net is just not going to cut it when the Florida Panthers power play is clicking. Carter Verhaeghe is popping goals. And then you even got like Sam Bennett starting to chip in again. I don't know how you feel about it. I think obviously another OT game, we could sit here and pick aside both teams and issues on both sides. But for me, special teams, once again, Steele, they got to be getting it done there. And yeah, props to Vincent Trocheck. He's really carrying them. But Mika Zibanejad has been a ghost the last couple of games. I think he has no points in the last 3 or 4 games. And that's just not going to be good enough.
It's not good enough. And even you can go up to, I know Artemi Panarin had 2 assists last night, so he was a little bit of a factor there in those 2 goals for them. But both, I think their top dogs have really struggled offensively and really finding their game against the Florida Panthers. But for me in Game 4, the 2 factors, you mentioned both of them. Number one, the lack of offensive production, the lack of offensive chances from the New York Rangers. They had 23 shots on net. And 8 of them were, not 8 of them, but the Florida Panthers had 8 blocks in the game. So the New York Rangers did a lot of things right because they outblocked the Florida Panthers 28-8, but they still got outshot 40-23. So that's them being outshot attempt 68 to 31. That's not good enough. The turnovers, the turnover ratio for the Florida Panthers to the New York Rangers. Florida Panthers had 17 turnovers. New York Rangers had 12. So they were doing a lot of things right, but it really came down to the lack of shots on net for the New York Rangers and the penalty kill because it does say 2 for 4 on the score sheet, but it was really 3 for 4. The Florida Panthers were 75% on the power play because when you look at the Sam Bennett goal, they were on the power play up until the last second. They scored as whoever was just exiting the box. So I know it doesn't say it on the score sheet, but it was pretty much 3 goals on the power play for the Florida Panthers, and they won 3-2 All 3 goals pretty much came on the power play for me. That has been a huge factor in this series so far. They've struggled on the penalty kill. And the power play for the Florida Panthers is one of the best, if not the best. When I look at that overtime goal from Sam Reinhart, the tic-tac-toe play, I believe every single player on the Florida Panthers that was on the ice during that power play touched the puck. It just went bang, 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 down to Alexander Barkov, who's always skating around, who's always getting himself open. He finds Sam Reinhart in the slot where he's been so many times this year. I don't know how no one's covering him.
Yeah, good question.
He buries it past Igor Shesterkin. So the power play for the Florida Panthers has been almost unstoppable this series. The penalty kill has been penetrable for the New York Rangers. It's been pretty abysmal out there. So I just, again, you mentioned it. Those are the 2 factors for me. The penalty kill for the New York Rangers has been garbage, and the lack of shot production on Sergei Bobrovsky has really been very abysmal as well.
We know Sergei Bobrovsky is a goaltender that he's unflappable. He is a very calm presence, steadying presence in that blue paint for the Florida Panthers. A guy who has multiple Vezinas and who just stood on his head all postseason long last season. So do not let this guy get comfortable. That will be bad news for the New York Rangers. You got to get in his cage. You got to put bodies in front of the net. I'm not saying run a goaltender. I'm not that kind of guy. But put some pressure on Bobrovsky, because if you're not going to do it with shots, you're going to have to rattle his cage a little bit, because 23 shots or 28 shots or whatever Steele, I'm butchering this.
23 shots
is not going to be nearly enough to rattle his cage. And look, this Florida Panthers team, don't let the swagger get going, because that's also a tough thing to stop, which we just saw them run through all the way to Vegas last year. What about Alexis Lafreniere? Just very quickly, again, on the scoreboard, Steele, you've talked about it. You and I have talked about it at length now. I just got to say, you and I might have to fight over this player next fantasy draft because I want him on my team real bad. That's just had to be said. Got to give you your credit there. And let me leave it at this. Barkov, and you know I love repeating this term, I'm going to say it. I think he is the most, I'm not going to say underrated, I'm going to say underappreciated stars out there. Maybe because of the market he plays in, maybe because he's just a very quiet guy. But in my opinion, Steele, on any other team or in a bigger market, this guy is a superstar, and I think he is very underappreciated. I'm not going to say underrated because hockey people know about him, but I think he is very underappreciated, and on a bigger team, this guy is a much bigger name in the NHL.
Yeah, and I got to point the finger at myself for that as well, because as much as I want the New York Rangers to win this series and I have money on them winning the Stanley Cup, I have not talked enough about Alexander Barkov on this podcast. So I need to point the finger at myself here, because he has been he's been so amazing for what they've done. And we've been talking about Sam Reinhart and Sam Bennett and Sergei Bobrovsky, but we need to be talking more about Barkov, because the way he's facilitating the puck, the way he gets himself open, not just on the power play, but 5-on-5. I don't know if you saw that clip from, I believe it was game 3, but someone passing the puck, it was in his feet, and he just angled it back to Brandon Montour, whoever it was. He is so creative with his passing ability. He doesn't even need his stick to pass the puck. So he's one of the best. No, he is the best two-way forward in the game. He's so good in the defensive end. Selke Award winner multiple times now. He is so good at his job. He's so good in the offensive zone. He's so good at finding his teammates in those areas where you don't think he's where you don't think he's going to be able to get the puck to, but he finds them and he puts it on the tape 10 out of 10 times. So Alexander Barkov, I love that you're bringing his name up, because I specifically need to do a better job, but us as a hockey community need to do a lot better job.
Do better, people.
Do better out there. Do better. But
look, we're going to try doing that with our bets.
Yeah, we are.
Because my same game parlay clapped on Monday. I'm trying to get back at it. It's been a pretty good month. We got Gemini season coming up. We got some birthday plans that you and I are going to need a little extra money for. Are trying to work on the drive. We need to get better off the tee, Steele, so we're going to need some cash. Why don't you take us to bets, brother, because I'm ready for this.
Big time bets. We're going to round out this episode like we always do. But thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, making it your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate it every single day. So thank you so much for tuning in. Flip, over to big time bets. I'm going to throw it over to you real quickly, but first I got to talk about last game between the Oilers and Stars, because my same game parlay was looking so good halfway through the game. I clutched the Connor McDavid anytime goal. I got the Jason Robertson anytime goal. It was 2-1 Edmonton.
Yeah.
The under was looking great.
Yes.
The Oilers money line was looking great.
Yeah.
And then Robertson just decides to blow it all up.
He decided to wake up.
He decided to wake up in this game, and I did not expect. I expected him to get on the score sheet, just not 3 different times. So my parlay went out the window. We're gonna get back to it though in Game 4. Over to you, my friend.
Yeah.
What are you looking at, and who do you have winning this game?
Okay, first and foremost, I just got to talk about the goaltending in last game because it's going to play into one of my picks. I think Stuart Skinner took a lot of unnecessary heat online because for the most part, he was good. And I understand he kind of botched that play where Robertson, he looked him off and then he tucked it in. He should have maybe hugged tighter to his post. You could break down that a bunch of different ways. But I think he was fairly solid all around, made a number of big saves in that game. However, I think after that kind of rattling experience of Jason Robertson exploding there, that goal, all the pressure, all the narrative of the Oilers not getting that opportunity, they're blowing another chance to really take the series. It's playing into, I'm liking the over in this one, Steele, because that first bit of McDavid magic in Game 3, it looked like he was going to have like a 6-point night. He was everywhere. He had an assist right off the bat. Then he scored the second. So I'm liking the over. Factor that in with Stuart Skinner still looking a little bit shaky at times.
Over
I like
6.5?
I'm going to tease it down to over 5.5. You're going to get a little bit of a lesser odd. I did this the other night, and I took it up, and I liked it. So over 5.5, and I'm just going to spit out my second two. McDavid over 1.5 points. That's my lock of the night, but I am going to ride with my Stars, Steele. I still think they're going to get it done. I think they're going to take both games. McDavid is going to do his thing, but they are not deep enough to roll 3 lines. They are getting outworked on the matchups, and I'll spit it out lastly. The Dallas Stars get this one done. So Stars on the money line. I'm keeping it going, Steele. I'm not backing down. I know that's a bold pick. You're going to get some good odds there. I'm taking the juice on the under 5.5. So I'm taking some more with the Stars on the money line. But my lock of the night, McDavid over 1.5. If you're not liking my other angles, 97 is going to come out with at least a couple of apples, if not another goal. So that would be my favorite bet of the night. But I'm going to ride with the over, and I'm going to ride with the Stars on the money line.
Yeah, I like 2 out of those 3 picks.
I figured
there,
you would.
Flip. We're gonna have a little side bet action again. I love the over 5.5 in this matchup. I think exactly what you're thinking. We're still going to see a goalie show up between Jake Oettinger and Stuart Skinner, but there's too much offensive superstars on both sides of these squads, and the power play on both sides as well. When they get into it, they've been fairly good this postseason. Maybe not in this series, but in this postseason.
And Rupe Hintz being back alongside Jason Robertson,
that's a huge
obviously
factor.
Huge.
Yeah, he was a huge presence in that hat trick for Jason Robertson. So I like the over 5.5. I'm with you there. I like the McDavid over 1.5 points in this matchup as well. That's my lock of the night too.
Yes.
But I am going with the Oilers on the money line at minus 124. I believe it is. Oilers money line minus 137. You parlay all 3 of those together, you're going to get a plus 228 odd. It's not the greatest, but that's exactly what I'm feeling. You're going to get a better odd with Flip same game parlay with the Stars on the money line at plus 114.
For sure.
But 2 out of 3 of the picks, we're on the same page here. It's just about who's winning this game.
Hey, and look, obviously, you're going to get the best game possible from the Edmonton Oilers. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at the Dallas Stars.
They have
obviously tonight. And I'm fired up to see what happens. Of course, I'll be tuned in watching this one very closely, Steele. You and I said it right before we jumped on, though, and let's just leave it at this because this just holds true across the rest of the hockey games you and I are going to break down is the margin for error is razor thin. The opportunities are starting to become few and far between. And mistakes being made. Look, the Oilers made too many of them. There was poor turnovers. That third line is coughing up the puck. They need to be better through the neutral zone. All of these little
has been invisible.
And all of these little mistakes during the regular season, yeah, maybe you get by. But now they are magnified times 100 because of how tight the play is. So as much as I'm going with the Stars, you like the Oilers. Right now, obviously, take a look at the Rangers and Panthers, 3 straight OT games. These are coin flips in terms of the money line. So if you're not liking our money line bets, I would implore you to just ride with the player props and the over-unders, because at this time of year, those are a little bit easier to handicap. But that's all I got, Steele, and I'm ready for tomorrow's episode.
They are definitely a lot easier than picking the winners in this matchup, but that's what we try to do out here on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen every single day. Once again, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Today. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You could also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. They are here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.